What would you do if you had the freedom to pursue the things you enjoy the most? How incredible would it feel to have the resources to pursue your passions fully and live life on your terms? This is Brandon Jenkins, host of the Capital Stack podcast and principal of Birch Prosper. You might have heard that 90% of the world's wealthiest people attribute their wealth to real estate investing. Well, guess what? It's true. Investing in real property continues to be the greatest generator of wealth all over the world. So join us each week on the Capital Stack podcast to hear about how commercial real estate group investment opportunities can help you reach true financial freedom and give you your time back. Hello, everyone. What's up? And welcome back to the Capital Stack. So I'm really excited for today's show. We have a guest who has harnessed the power of focusing on her strengths in her business, focusing on the things she does really well, and knowing how to structure a team around filling any gaps that might be there. So if you've ever read the book, Who, Not How, then you'll understand why this principle is a key to success. Our guest today is Angel Williams. She began her real estate investing journey in 2003 and is a co-founder of the Academy Presents and a managing partner of Lorren Capital. Angel's experience spans the single-family rental space, multifamily rentals and syndications, and oil and gas investing, which is also near and dear to my heart. She is a full-time investor who specializes in building relationships and raising capital, and her experience as a GP covers the spectrum of critical roles for any successful syndicator, serving as a lead sponsor, sourcing deals, underwriting and analysis, raising capital, and as asset management. So she's really got it all covered. So with that, welcome to the show, Angel. Very happy to have you here. Happy to share your story and your mission with the world. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, wow. Well, first off, you make me sound amazing.
You are amazing.
Wow. Thank you very much. My husband and I, we both grew up in families invested in real estate. His last day in his W-2 was actually last Thursday.
Wow. Congrats.
Yeah, so we're excited. He's really focusing on his underwriting skills right now. He's been focusing on them for a long time, but now he's really going headstrong and headfirst into his business, which is Second Set of Eyes for underwriting. So we're excited because he's going to be able to look at more deals. We're going to be able to get more involved because it's been kind of slow because I feel like it's me.
No. I thought you meant the market.
I can meet people, I can talk to people, but I don't run numbers. I can on the residential side because that's I'm way more comfortable in residential. It's easier for me now, especially now. So if you are somebody that's doing residential, don't ever feel like you're less than. Because I sometimes I feel like when you get into groups of a lot of commercial real estate investors, you're kind of made to feel less than. And by no means are you less than. That just happens to be your comfort level. So if that's what you're doing, slay it.
Yeah, I agree. You know what? I actually, so I know quite a few commercial real estate investors who really say that they will never stop buying, the deals on the single family residential space because they cash flow really well, and you can really set up a system to where your acquisitions and management components are just so well taken care of, and they almost take care of themselves. So I know quite a few that even though they're very experienced in the syndication space, if a deal comes along and it's a deal, then it's a deal, and so they buy it. so I agree. It's definitely not, and you do see that. You do tend to see this in some groups, this notion that they're somehow more sophisticated, these kinds of things. And they're two different spaces, but yeah, if you're in a single family space and you enjoy it and that's what you're comfortable with, absolutely. It's still a great way to build wealth. There's no question about that.
And I think it's an amazing store of value because we've been able to cash out refi our singles. We've got 6 of them. And whenever we need to make a big investment, we can just cash out, refi them and put together 25, 40, 50,000, whatever we need to put together. So we particularly like them for that. But again, we're not actively seeking them out, but when they fall into our lap, we're going to buy them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's also flexibility there that you might not be able to see in the commercial space. When I started off on the single family side, I pretty much had kind of an understanding with my lender, which was kind of a local bank. And the understanding was, look, if I have a deal, I'll show you the numbers before I buy. But then when I buy, the understanding was, hey, I'll get 70 to 80% LTV, and then so we'll cash out, almost immediately, and then I'll kind of roll it into another property, these kinds of things. So I had kind of a, almost like a conveyor belt, I guess you could call it, to where it just, my manager already knew. I had them queued up. So it does flow really well, and it makes you a little more nimble. So, why not do both? I agree. So
Absolutely.
Why don't you tell us a little bit kind of about how you got your start? I really like that you have a family history in real estate. I find that, for folks who have an upbringing in the entrepreneurial space, almost no matter what it is, but certainly in real estate, they tend to follow with that, even if it means, having a career, right? Because you've been an educator and a teacher. And so you had a career, but you can also do, real estate, invest in real estate as you go. And so I love that, having that upbringing, being comfortable with it, makes it so that when it's time to execute and take action, it's a little bit easier. So can you kind of speak on that and how that's helped you develop?
Absolutely. So I was raised by my grandparents, and both of them had full-time jobs, but then they had their real estate stuff on the side. And it was the same for my husband. Both of his parents had full-time jobs. And then his dad and his mom were amassing these residential multis on the side. And so we both were exposed to basically real estate being a side hustle. Mm. And then in 2018, we met Joe Fairless, and we were listening to him. And it was like, at that point in time, he had like 58 or 59 million in assets under management, which now he's like up to 2 billion. Yeah. And it's what, 5 years later? Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. The thing was, we got to meet him very early on, and just watching his success over the last 5 years has been insane. But we saw the scalability of it. And so I watched my grandparents, and I thought we were pretty decent. I thought we were fairly wealthy. And then I hear about like Jason and his family. I'm like, wow, okay, so this can really work. And then we had our son in 2010, and we found out I guess he was 19 months old when we found out that he had a genetic disorder, really rare. When he was diagnosed, there were 742 cases in the world. There's more now because more people have been diagnosed. I think they're saying it's probably more like 1,400. Yes, so much more, almost double. Still very rare.
Still pretty rare, yeah. Very rare.
But when we got his diagnosis, like I was able to research a lot and get some answers, but not the kind of answers like, oh yeah, we're going to treat it this way and we're going to cure it, because there's no cure. So the research was basically just for information, but there was a period of time there where it was very unknown. It's still very unknown. And so we want to create a foundation for rare diseases, so that when people are in that unknown period of what if it's like this, what if it's like this, what if my kid only has 3 years left to live? I mean, like all of those what ifs, we want to be able to provide education and support for families that are in that unknown period, so that it's just a little bit easier. And to be able to do something like that, we needed something with scale. And so that got us into multifamily. But I feel like if we hadn't grown up with families that had that entrepreneurial spirit on the side, even though it was on the side, I don't think that we would have been so willing to jump in. And I know for a fact, my husband last Thursday would have been fruiting out about what his next job was going to be if we didn't have this, because he posted on Facebook just yesterday, when I found out I was not going to have a job come, last Thursday, I wasn't freaking out. I wasn't looking for another job, because investing has given me a spot where I don't have to worry about taking care of my family.
That's incredible. I mean, and I can tell you that I a couple of years ago, or almost 3 years ago now, I got laid off, and this is even after I had been investing in real estate for several years, and I got laid off, and I took a couple months and said, okay, well, I'll figure things out. But then after that couple months, I ran right back to trying to plug into that system, get right back on the hamster wheel, so to speak, or back into the rat race. And I think it is partially because, for me, my upbringing was different. I wasn't brought into kind of this entrepreneurial space. And so there's an element of fear, because it feels like you're in a space that is outside of what you're quote unquote supposed to be doing. And so obviously fast forward to now, my perspective is different, but it is interesting that I've seen that as well. Folks who've been brought up in a space where they can create and they can build things for themselves financially, even if they have, you know, a W-2, but they're doing things on the side to help minimize the hold, I guess, the financial hold that that job has on them. I've seen those people, you know, people come up and be more comfortable with getting out of their comfort zone, be more comfortable with making the commitment to something that is not, you know, conventional, but in my mind, outside of your comfort zone, that's where opportunity is, right? Both financial and whether it's, you know, in terms of growth or personal development. So yeah, I really applaud that. I think that's just powerful to be able to make the decision, right? To say, I no longer want to work and I know what I'm going to be doing with my time.
Well, and it's hard to break free sometimes because, like, just the other day, I saw there was a music position open, which my favorite job teaching, K-5 music. Love it. It is amazing. I felt like I got paid for acting like an absolute fool all day, every day, playing instruments, acting goofy, making up dances. It was so much fun. I saw the job come up at the school that's like 3 blocks from my house as a music teacher. And I was like, oh, love that job. And then I'm like, nope, because I get to fill my teacher heart practically every day with the Academy Presents, REI Rocks, because I get to share my story. And I've really been fine tuning that too into this idea of, man, quit working on your weaknesses. Find somebody else that can cover that crap for you. Because if you work on your superpowers, you could be one of the top people in the nation in your superpower. And then, like, to be able to share that with people is just like, man, it is fulfilling. And so while we were doing all this and Jason was still working his job, I couldn't understand why he wasn't fulfilled. I'm like, what do you mean you're not fulfilled? My heart is like, it's like, you know, coming over the sides. It's overfilling. I'm having an awesome time. And he's like, yeah, I'm still working. So, and honestly, his cup overfills and is overjoyed when he's underwriting and sitting in front of spreadsheets, which makes me nauseous. So now he gets to spend his mornings making me nauseous, basically.
Yeah, you know what? I'm also a spreadsheet junkie, so I can relate. You know, it's just like, and you know what? So you actually touched on something I like to dig into a little bit, right? Because you're a lifelong learner, but you're also a lifelong educator for those who don't know you. So you've tapped into your experience as an educator to create the Academy Presents. And I absolutely love the look and feel of the website, by the way. I think that it kind of puts you into a true learning environment, kind of a mindset. And I really like the flashcards, by the way. I think those are incredible. But can you share kind of a little bit about how your experience as an educator and as a lifelong learner has maybe helped you in the real estate investing space?
So one of the things that you'll hear is that everybody is so helpful in the space. And they are up to a point. And I'm not trying to throw shade. I'm not trying to point people out or accuse people, but when we were doing our first deal, man, things were going crazy sideways. And like we had 100,000 that went hard on day one. We were going to lose it. My husband came home from work one day and he was like, oh my God, I'm so glad you're just asleep. It's like, I can't think right now. It was like noon. I was still in bed because I was depressed. And he was like, I can't think about anything at work. All I can think about is losing that money. And he was crying. And so I'd comfort him and then I'd cry and he'd comfort me. And who not how absolutely came into place because we made a list of 35 people that we felt like had the financial wherewithal, the experience and the knowledge to help us out. And we really thought we'd be done in the first 5 people. No, it was call 16, where we actually had somebody that helped us out, dropped everything and helped us get a loan product that day and got us back on track. But you can't fully educate yourself based on everybody else that's out there.
Yeah. You've
got to take some initiative to learn it on your own. And getting that first deal is so hard. I've never heard anyone say their first deal was easy. So just kind of push that out of your mind. It's not easy. Even your first single family home is not easy. Your first, residential multi, we've never done duplexes, triplexes, or quads, but my father-in-law, he didn't think it was easy either. He actually took I want to say it was his kids' college fund money and used that to buy their first duplex or quad. I forget which one.
Oh,
So
we're glad it worked out.
Yeah. So his dad passed away in 2018, but I remember him telling Jason, y'all are going to do so much better than we did because you're starting so much earlier. Because Jason bought our first house when he was 24. And Jason's dad said he got started in his 40s.
So it's working. I mean, that's a clear sign right there. I mean, it's, that's generational wealth and legacy being passed down, and you can see it at work. And I'd like to talk, you touched on the power of your network right there, which I think is just very important. That's something for the listeners to clue into, right? So you made a list of 35 people, and you went down and called the folks on that list. And how many people would have stopped at call number 3, call number 5, 10, 20? I mean, but you got in there and kept calling, and call number 16 was the one that helped out. And I just think that persistence, understanding the power of your network, but understanding the importance of building a network, because you had 35 people. So, I mean, if you had 0 people, then, or even 10, you wouldn't have made it to 16, right? So I really like that. I think that's just super powerful. And so for the folks who, it's a podcast, but for folks who can't see it, you have Real Estate Investing Rocks behind you. Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little bit about kind of that community and that space that you built, and if you would?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Academy Presents Real Estate Investing Rocks was really born out of this idea of, I knew I was leaving teaching. I was having mental issues. It was a hard environment. Teachers are not treated well if they don't have a good and supportive principal. And so if the admin team is not allowed to support the teachers, it's just a horrible job. And it's not the kids. I was at a Title I high poverty, 45% Hispanic, 40% Black, 15% mixed white and Asian school. So a lot of people, especially white people, would have run from that demographic. I was there, and I love my babies. And yes, those are my babies. I know they're not biologically mine, but those are my babies. And I taught middle school at this point in time. And I felt bad when I knew that I couldn't keep going there because mentally I couldn't handle what was going on. And so me and my husband had a conversation. I was like, what can I do, Jason? All I can do is talk. I can talk. That's what I can do. And so we were like, okay, so how do we monetize that? Which honestly, we're still not real successful with monetizing the fact that I talk. But when it came to raising capital, we were really glad I talk.
That's kind of a requirement.
Yeah, but that's really where it was born from. And I wound up talking to Dan Hanford, and I was like, hey, what is the difference between a 1-day, a 2-day, and a 3-day event? And he's like, it's just coordinating people. I was naive enough to believe that. It is not just coordinating people. It was the hardest thing I had ever done in my life. And I had some help. Now it's easier. So I kind of understand where he's coming from. Now it's coordinating people, getting people on the list, making sure I have moderators for panels, making sure I've staffed the panels. Now it's easier. But that first one, even the second one, third one, man, holy night. Our 6th one's coming up in September. So we've got a different handle on it, but
how about that?
You get advice from sometimes.
Yeah, I see. And it's there again, though, it's like you mentioned, your first one is never easy, right? And so I would even say it's for the listeners who might be thinking that with a certain amount of you read enough books or something like that, and it somehow gets easier. The truth is, it just, until you do it, it's always going to be challenging, right? And then once you've done it, and then you repeat it, that's the power of repetition, right? Once you've done it, then you repeat it, it gets a little easier. You start finding out, okay, here are the things that I'm missing. Here are the things I can do without. And so here you are, you have your 6th one coming up. And I'm sure by now you figured things out to where you have a system going. And so I think that's incredible, and who, not how. It's just, for listeners, if you haven't read that book, you need to read it, because it's big on positioning the right people in your business, in your life, that can help you get to where you want to go, right? If you spend, the more time you spend on the how, the less productive you ultimately are. And so you have that down pat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's only 24 hours in the day. You as a person can only do so much. And so I feel like there's 2 schools of thought really in not even just in this space, but in all spaces. There is that transactional side where the more I hustle, the more I make. And then there's the relational side where the more people I meet, it's a slower roll in the beginning, but then once you hit growth, it is exponential. And so I feel like there's kind of those two groups. And I know people in both. I get along with people in both. But for me personally, man, I don't want to work harder. I want to work smarter.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the way to do it. That's how you get farther, right? You can get stuck on, just think about, even with, think about multifamily. Think about all the moving parts. If you wanted to, if you felt like, you felt so inclined, you can dig into mortgage origination if you wanted to. You could tell yourself that before I start, I need to understand mortgage origination. Before I start, I need to understand the ins and outs of every single component that makes up the structure of an apartment building. And before I start, I need to understand all of the details of the transactional and the legal and securities. So it could take years. I mean, but understanding that, you know what, I'm going to make sure that I put the right people in the right places to help me achieve this mission. I'm going to convey to them the importance of what the mission is, what success looks like for me, for us. And then I'm going to empower them to do what they need to do. And so that even comes to your own team. You mentioned that your husband does underwriting now. And for you, it's about connecting and building relationships. And so had you said, you know what, I want to understand all of it. I don't want to farm out any of it. I don't want to trust anyone with any piece. Can you imagine how long it would have taken? So.
Well, and part of that I think comes from being an educator, because you're not going to have a science teacher teaching English. Yep. You're not going to have an English teacher teaching, PE. We all have our specialties. And so I knew I didn't know what I was good at, but I knew what I wasn't good at. And honestly, finding out what my superpower was really goes back to Joe and some of our very first conversations with him. And he was like, okay, you're going to send these 2 questions out to 5 people and let me know what they say. And it was, what is this person's natural talent? What does this person do better than anybody else? And you send those 2 questions out to 5 people and see what the responses are. I sent it to 10, thinking 5 would respond, and I got 7 responses back. And they all said basically the same thing. I would talk to anybody. I would build like an instant friendship. And half the time I would have those people doing something for me by the end of the day. And I was like, what? No way. And once I really honed in on that and I started thinking about it, and I was like, well, I used to have models when I was in junior high, and I would do French braids for the players on the way to games. And they would pay me for French braiding their hair. Well, then I had a few girls that their hair was easier to braid, or it was easier to style. And so I would do more intricate braids on them, and I wouldn't charge them anything, so that they would show off their braids. And then I would get more customers.
There you go.
I mean, I didn't charge a whole bunch. It was like a couple dollars, $3, $4, $5 or something. And I would braid hair on the way to the games. But I started thinking about those things. I was like, how did I get those girls to let me braid their hair? And that would have been like 7th, 8th grade. Like, man, that's kind of crazy. And so I started thinking about things in my past where I had used that skill and didn't even realize it. And so I started understanding, hey, this is my superpower, and I don't need to work on underwriting. I don't need to work on my weaknesses, because every minute I take away from further developing my superpower is another minute that I don't get better. Because if I work on my weaknesses, at the end of the day, I'm still just a beginner. And I'm like, woohoo, mediocre.
Yeah. You know what? I agree 100% with you on that. And I think that what you have is the power to motivate, which is huge. Entire businesses are built by people who have the power to motivate, to inspire, and who understand what it means to empower someone to do what they do best. It's instead of getting in the way, and instead of saying, wait, come back and let me, check back in every 2 seconds. It's like, no, here's what I would like you to do. I know that you do well at it, and let's catch up later. But we'll go do what you do. And so the power to motivate, the power to get people to move, and the power to inspire, I think is very, very powerful. And I wanted to touch on that as well. So not the first time, but one of the meetups that you and I both attended, I heard you speak on this very topic, right? It's about being authentic to yourself as it relates to your business. And I just really like your perspective on that. And it was about, you also talked about brand authenticity, which I think the two kind of go hand in hand. There isn't, being authentic about what your skill set is, but also brand authenticity, which I thought was great. So being true to yourself. So how has that helped you expand your brand and build the community around the Academy Presents?
So we draw a particular type of person. I wish I could tell you I knew what that person was and that I've got this avatar all figured out, but I have no clue. I really have no clue. I just know that there are specific people that are drawn to us, and it's not age-based. It's not occupation-based. It's none of those things. So I come back to, it's just, I try and always be true to myself. Well, I'm a big extrovert. My husband's a big introvert, but he does the same thing. And so what we kind of realized is that you've got to be super comfortable with yourself to really be true to yourself. And again, I look back in education and I think about being in middle school, and some of my students were super funny. They're like, white girl from Baylor, because I went to Baylor. And I was like, don't read a book by its cover. And they just they really honed in me the necessity of being yourself 100% of the time. And did I let my students know when I was having a bad day? Heck yeah, I did. And did I expect them to come in and say, hey, I had a rough morning? I did, because then I had a better idea of how to respond to their needs on those days. And if you're not 100% comfortable with yourself, you're not going to be comfortable telling people, man, I had a rough morning. Or in my case, I'd be like, man, my meds haven't kicked in. I am so sorry that I'm not paying attention. I'm trying to pay attention. I'm hearing your voice, but I'm hearing everybody else's voices around you.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be comfortable with yourself to be able to really be yourself and be true to yourself. Because, man, if you can't be true to yourself, who can you be true to? It really starts from within.
Yeah, I think that's powerful. And that way you have genuine interactions and engagement with people too. Because if you think about it, if you're true to yourself, then you will attract the people who align with your philosophies and personality and everything else. So that almost takes care of itself, as opposed to not being authentic and then attracting people who at some point you're going to clash with because they're just not really aligned with who you are. And so at some point it will, for folks who believe that they can grow without being authentic, it's going to come back to bite them, because that relationship's not going to be what they, I don't know, it's not going to be exactly what they let on. It's going to go sour. It's not going to work well because there's just a clash. And so having this natural, I am myself, and I'm open, and I'm free to be who I am, and I'm still building my business around who I am. And then knowing that you have people who are attracted to that, it just makes
people
it easier.
Self-select.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And especially with this, because I find that this is a very real estate syndication. These opportunities are very difficult to sell for someone who's not looking for it. And likewise, the communities that are built in this space are difficult to sort of pitch without someone kind of looking for a community, an ecosystem that fits them. So, there's almost really the gain, the return on trying to be sort of fake and then hoping you can capture everybody. It just is not really there. It's not worthwhile. So,
well, I think people don't go into it saying, oh, I'm going to be fake. They go into it thinking, oh, I'm not comfortable, because you're not comfortable when you're not you. And they think, oh, well, I must be growing.
Yeah.
No, you may be mistaking discomfort with not being yourself with being outside your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And they're two different things, very difficult to tell the difference between.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but that was one of the reasons why we created the community too. We've got the Academy Presents REI Rocks community, so that we could create our own community of people similar to us, that think like us, that want to be in and around people that are like us, because we're different. Like when I think about my teacher friends, I had 2 friends that were willing to entertain my conversations. One of whom had been self-sufficient as an author and then went back to teaching later. And another who, like what you said, he's like, well, I do real estate. I should become a loan originator. And now he's like, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And we're like, ooh. So we're trying to slow him down and say, hey, I know you feel out of place because you resigned and you're not a teacher anymore, but just hold on. Let's get some direction here. And to be able to do that and not feel attacked as the person receiving it, that can be a little difficult. And it can also be difficult to try and share your own experiences with someone without feeling like you have to attack them because they're not listening.
Yeah, it's not easy. You're right, and they call that shiny object syndrome, right? It's part shiny object syndrome, but then part imposter syndrome, where you almost feel like, I'm in this new space, and so I'm not really sure of kind of and confident in my own ability, so I need to chase down everything so that I can learn everything about all aspects of this business, and it's kind of it makes it a lot more difficult to move forward by doing that. So I wanted to sort of ask, even building on that topic, like what do you think kind of holds people back? So once they do get to the point where they have the information, they have the content, but they haven't actually maybe taken action, what kind of holds people back from investing and from moving forward, do you think?
So I actually battle imposter syndrome myself. And I'm not saying I'm some, Billy Bad Butt or whatever, and I'm amazing, but I'm just saying, there's times where I just want to lay in bed because I feel like I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm 45, I'm watching all these superstar kids, literal kids, like the Donis brothers.
Yeah, I've seen
They're
them.
like, what, 20? And then the oldest one is, let me think. I think Kerwin's the oldest one, and he's like, what, 24? And they're freaking killing it in the space. And I'm like, I'm old enough to be these kids' mom.
Yeah.
What am I doing? I'm too old. I got started too late. I'm not smart enough. There's all of these things that come on you. And then it's like, I think about my meetup and I think about the summits, and I'm like, why in the world do I ever do those? I'm not Dan Hanford. He's amazing. He got Shaq to come up to his last thing. Shaq, really? I'm Willow G, or what is it? Jocko Willink. I can't do those things. Susan Cochran. I don't even know how I would talk to those people, and I can talk to anybody, but it's like you have all these things inside of you. And if you've ever seen the book Positive Intelligence, that was the real game changer book for me, because basically we all have this judge inside of us that says, you can't do that. You're not good enough to do that. And if you realize it as this judge, and it's just something inside of you that's kind of working against you, you can hear those thoughts and let them pass. Now, like I said, I battle it. I hear it. I know it's the judge, but then I'm like, but what if it's true? And I will. There are days when I've been in bed for so many days, I'm like, oh my God, I've got to at least take a shower.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's debilitating. And so even when you've been doing it, we've been in real estate for 20 years. Even when you've been doing it, it's still going to come up every now and then where you start to have that self-doubt. Mm-hmm. But for someone that is really having a hard time, you're in analysis paralysis, or you feel like you're not good enough, just try and find a different set of people. What I found, especially in education, is that you tell your ideas to people and are like, that's never going to happen. Are you stupid? But the thing that I discovered was when I told my kids my dreams, my students my dreams, man, they supported it 100% because they hadn't been adulterated with the doubt. And so they would be like, Miss, you deserve that. You deserve that. And they would hype me up, and it helped. It helped a lot. And now that I'm not in education, it's like I have to be my own biggest cheerleader, and I have to hype myself up. And sometimes I'm just not up to that. And so, just as advice, if you're having a down day, take your down day. Do what you need for yourself, because if you keep push, you're going to run out of steam. You got to give yourself some time. But part of it too is just doing it. And if you find the right people and you go to the right meetups, you're going to surround yourself with people that support your ideas. So when you're able to share your crazy ideas and people don't think they're crazy, you have found your people.
Oh yeah.
And that's the support system you're going to need to have around you. And it may cost you friends and family that you've had your whole life.
Yeah. The power of getting into the right ecosystem and surrounding yourself with the right people, it's just the exponential growth and development can come from that. And you're going to need that, in this space, because things can and will go wrong. And if you are not surrounded by the people who are supportive of you, then it can just be all the more challenging. And so if you have people, I like that you said that, take your down day, Go ahead. Don't overstress yourself. No matter how experienced folks are, there's always going to be some doubt that hits, and just take a day to decompress. But always try and surround yourself with people who whose interests are aligned with yours, but who are about genuinely supporting each other, and who have that kind of abundance mindset and who appreciate collaboration. It's just, to me, only good things can come out of that kind of space. So I think that's very powerful. Angel, you mentioned earlier your first deal, and and I know we've discussed a lot about development, growth, and mindset and things, and I kind of wanted to get your maybe just some details around kind of the first deal, and just at a high level, but how did you get the deal, and then kind of how did it go, and these kinds of things.
I was actually sitting in my car, and I got a text that said, "Hey, this property's coming out." I'm like, "Oh, that's in Wichita Falls." And I was like, well, I haven't really ever talked to a broker before, but why not? So I called the car, and it was really kind of funny because he said he had his headphones around his neck, or his earbuds around his neck. And so he didn't realize he was in his vehicle. He didn't realize it had picked up. And so I'm like, hello. And he's like, oh, I didn't know anybody was there. I was like, hey, I got this text, and I see that you're the person I'm supposed to call. We'd like to arrange a tour or get to look at the property. I mean, it's right here. And he was like, okay, well, I can do this date at noon. I'm like, okay, pencil me in. If I don't call back and say it's bad, we'll take it. Like, but my husband has W-2, and that's his lunch hour, but it should work. And that was how we got the deal. It came in a mass text, and I just called.
There you
and
go.
So we got it. And we went through 6 GP team members before landing on a third team that got the deal across the finish line. So people are like, how many deals have you done? You don't have that much experience. And I'm like, oh, no, we share.
A whole lot of experience.
We went through a whole bunch of people to get to where we are. So, we learned, I would say, in the 5 years that we were with a coach, we were passive investors, and we were learning on our own. In 5 months, we learned as much as we learned in 5 years. Because we were under contract for 5 months. Thank goodness the seller was willing to wait for us. But we got under contract in August, and we didn't get it across the finish line until December. So
incredible.
Yeah, when you see online, you see people under contract, closed, oversubscribed, all those things. That stuff doesn't happen overnight. Maybe it does for some people. It did not for us. And like when you see on there, like we were lead sponsors, that's because we were the lead sponsors of our own first deal, because we lost our KPs. And then we got to a point where the agency loan would not accept any of the KPs that we were bringing to them. And so one of the things that my husband and I decided, and we were like, we're just not chasing agency again. We won't do it, especially right now. And so we actually went with a bridge. We went with a company that people will say, oh my gosh, they're so expensive. Well, but once we were approved, 28 days later, we were closing, and nobody else could get us closed in 21. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we went through, God, I bet we went through 15 loan products.
Really?
Oh yeah. Trying to get them. We'd have all the term sheets. We're ready to go. And then we'd get there to about to do it. And all of a sudden it would go from 75% to, 60%. And we were like, well, crap.
Yeah.
We're already having a hard time raising capital. How are we going to raise 3 million when we're really pushing it to get 1.9? And so it was, we came up against so many obstacles. And so we learned, I don't want to say that like we've learned more than a lot of people. I don't think that's true. I think everybody has a difficult time. But I feel like I personally learned a massive amount about just people and how people respond to risk, which kind of comes from my econ background too. So my degrees are in economics, and a lot of people say, oh, economics, you must be good with money. Well, no, economics is a social science. So economics is actually the study of how people respond to incentives. And I would go further to say it's also the study of how people respond to disincentives. And so I got to see firsthand how people respond to risk, how people respond to reward, how people respond to hardships, obstacles. I got to see all of that firsthand, real time. And so I feel like I learned like a whole new world during those 5 months. And I feel like we're going to be able to take that experience and be very successful in the future because of that experience.
Yeah, I think that I think that's incredible. I had a conversation not too long ago with the syndicator, and and my question was, well, what do people typically leave out of their discussions with investors, and even their presentations? And it's around how well they will manage risk. It's how what knowledge do you have or experience do you have that can help protect against certain mishaps. And like you just said, having gone through that process now, you can very clearly say in getting the deal across the finish line, these are the things that we would do to address the various risks that come up during the transaction. And so, I believe that will help reassure investors to say, okay, you know what, they're going to get across the finish line. And so that makes me feel a lot better now about saying, okay, I can commit some capital to this opportunity. So yeah, it's the power of doing, right? You mentioned in 5 years, you had a lot of learning and things like that, but in that 5 months, that grind, you learned a whole lot. So I think that's just a powerful message. And we're getting kind of close to close, Angel. But I wanted to ask, and I think you might have already touched on this a little bit earlier, but I did want to get into the actionable tip part of the show. And for someone who's listening, to this and who might be kind of hesitant, they want to get in the game, but they maybe don't know how to start. Like, what would you say is a great way to just get started in real estate now?
So I would say start going to events, whether those are virtual, face-to-face. And my husband and I came up against this issue. He's a big time introvert. If you are an introvert and you're like, oh my God, she's saying that because it was easy for her, I'm going to give you a hint. Find you an extrovert friend. All introverts have them. We're loud. We're obnoxious. Go find you one of them. They don't have to be involved in real estate because honestly, we just like to be around people. We don't have to have similar interests even. We just like to be around people. Find you an extrovert and get you a wingman or wingwoman and start going to events and let them be the person that starts the conversations. And then you can just be there listening.
Yeah.
But your face is still there and people are going to remember seeing your face. And they may even think that you were talking because it's a positioning technique. You've positioned yourself next to this extrovert, which not everybody likes them. Like my personality, you either like me or you don't. There's not a lot of middle ground. But for the people that will talk to us, you would be right there next to that person. And so you're going to be remembered as, hey, I was next to this person that had really good conversations and was willing to listen to me. And I was able to have my input too. And so they see you positioned in a place where you're going to be remembered, not just as a wallflower.
Wow. I think that's incredible. I could have used that a couple of years ago. So I'm the same. I've been, sort of introvert, unless I found that unless it's about real estate, then I'm very reserved. But when it comes to this, I just can't stop talking about it. And so,
because you're on fire about it.
Yeah, exactly. As I'm passionate about it, and so, but you're right. I would say that's a great way to do it. And I think that right now, one of the benefits that we have, that everyone has, is that a lot of meetups are virtual. So if you are an introvert, start filling up your calendar, because I think that it's easy to at least sort of kind of ease into it. And then eventually you'll find yourself speaking more, being more vocal and these kinds of things. So great tip. I really appreciate that. And so before we wrap, Angel, wanted to ask kind of how folks can get in touch with you and learn more about you, your social media links and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got www.theacademypresents.com. That's our website. Sometimes it gets a little bogged down. It's not the best. We're working on it. On Facebook, I'm Angel Renee. We have our Facebook community there with the Academy Presents Real Estate Investing Rocks community. And then on LinkedIn, I'm Angel Williams, and I do respond to all of my own DMs. So I do have an assistant, and she responds some if it's like a question that I don't get to, but she usually sends it to me and she's like, hey, have you responded to this yet? Because I told her a long time ago, I said, let's say a long time ago, I haven't had her that long. But one of the main reasons why I never had a VA was because I never wanted to go somewhere and have someone say, don't you remember that conversation we had? And I wouldn't be able to remember it because it wasn't me talking. And so it was a big goal of mine to make sure that I was involved in all the conversations and that I was a piece of that. And I saw them, and I was having true, actual interactions with people and not somebody else doing it on my behalf. So I do answer all my own stuff because that's a big fear of mine, is that I'm going to wind up somewhere and someone's going to be like, hey, don't you remember when we talked about this? I'll be like, Oh, you're in the headlights. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, there it is. See, and that's that authenticity again, right? I mean, so I know I love that. Well, look, Angel, this has been an absolute pleasure. And I really, really appreciate having you on the show. And, I've been laughing and smiling and so I really appreciate your energy and everything. So thank you so much for being a guest on the show.
Man, thank you for letting me be a part of this. You're doing amazing things here, and I'm just glad that I get to be a part.
Awesome. Thank you. As always, thank you so much for tuning in to the show today, brought to you by Bridge Prosper. If you enjoyed today's episode and you'd like to learn more about commercial real estate investing, please like, subscribe, and share. And we'll see you again next week. I'm Brandon Jenkins, and this is the Capital Stack, where we help you learn, apply, and prosper.